Despite coming in at only 40% ABV, the Fercullen 8-year-old promises a lot. Let's see if it delivers. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Matt, I'm a whiskey nerd, and like I said, this is the Fercullen 8-year-old blend. So let me get it into the glass and I'll tell you a bit more about it. Now, the Fercullen comes from the Powerscourt Distillery. They're a relatively new distillery and they haven't actually got all their stock yet aged, which means they will have had to source their whiskies to go into this 8-year-old blend. Now, Powerscourt are trying to position themselves in the market as being a kind of a more premium, upmarket, top shelf kind of whiskey. So I really hope they source some good whiskies because this is really their first main foray into the kind of world of whiskey. And why did I mention the 40%? Well, 40% alcohol by volume is the minimum that a whiskey can be and still be called whiskey. So if you go below that, it's technically not whiskey. Now, 40% is very approachable, it's very drinkable, it's very kind of easy to use, but sometimes whiskeys do lose flavor when they've been diluted down from about 60% ABV down to 40% ABV. And that's why we see kind of other more upmarket whiskies like Teeling, like Dingle, even like Roe & Co. coming out with whiskies around 45, 46% ABV. So they've got a lot of flavor and they can either stand up on their own or in a cocktail. Fercullen though, for this whiskey at least, have proved it down to 40%. So I'm really hoping it's still able to deliver a lot of flavor on the nose, on the palate, and then give me a nice long finish despite only being at 40%. So let's go in for the nose. Okay, there's a lot of vanilla coming out of this glass, and it's a very sweet, sweet vanilla. I mean, it's not a bad note to have. It's going to have a lot of that kind of bourbon cask influence, where it's not going to be heavy on the oak, but it's going to have a lot of that sweetness coming through. There's also behind that a bit of orange, maybe not like the orange peel, but kind of like that smell of an orange juice. Like there's a bit of peel in there as well, but it's more on that kind of fresher citrus note. Tying in with that kind of sweetness of the orange, you got like a nice bit of like honey. It is a nice kind of thick nose on this. It is surprisingly thick despite only being at 40%. It's delivering a lot of sweetness. Not really getting a lot of spice. Yeah, I'm not really getting a whole lot of oak or spice coming out of the nose. Like it's mostly leading with that sweetness, with that kind of citrus note, with that honey note, with that vanilla. It is a very approachable nose, but it's not the very most complex nose. So let's go in for the palate and see if that complexity develops there. On the palate, again, it's leading with a sweetness. It's leading with kind of caramel, vanilla, a little bit of maybe honey as well coming through, but it's mostly that sweet caramel, that sweet vanilla. Underneath that though, there is a bit of spice, a bit of kind of that charred oak note coming through. So I'm going to go in again and I'm going to see if I can find more of that charred oak note. Okay, definitely a nice kind of layer of spice underneath all that sweetness. Like again, your caramel, your honey, your vanilla, that kind of sweetness is there. I'm not really getting that kind of orange that I was getting on the nose. It's more just kind of a nice round sweetness coming through. You can tell that there's a fair amount of grain alcohol being used here, but it doesn't actually taste bad. Like sometimes grain alcohol can be quite kind of ethanol forward, be quite sharp. People describe it as being like shiny or brittle, that kind of almost metallic taste you get. I'm not really getting that here. It is kind of covered up by that sweetness, that richness, that roundness. It is a nice kind of palate on this whiskey. So we'll go in again for the finish and we'll see how that develops. Okay, on the finish, a kind of a malty note comes forward. Like the sweetness, like with most sweet whiskeys, sweetness kind of fades away quickly. It does leave you with other notes. There's a bit of maltiness coming through. That charred oak, that kind of spiciness, that hangs around a bit more than that maltiness. It is a reasonably short finish. Like there's not a whole lot of evolution. Like it's your nose kind of promises the sweetness, the palate delivers the sweetness, and then the finish kind of lets it fade away. It's not really a complex evolution. It's not going to be completely different from the nose into the palate and into the finish. It's just kind of like a straightforward whiskey. That said though, I have had some kind of straightforward whiskeys that weren't nice to drink. Like this is a nice whiskey to drink. It's fruity, it has a bit of sweetness, it has a little bit of spice coming through. It's just like a nice sipping whiskey. And that might have been what they're going for here. They were going for their kind of first foray into the market to be just a nice, easy to drink whiskey that you could just pick up a bottle of this. If you weren't sure, it's a new brand, you pick up this bottle, you're not going to be really disappointed by it. I know that the Powerscourt Distillery have put out different whiskies with different kind of cask finishes under the Fercullen brand name, so maybe that's what they're hoping for, that this is kind of your entry, your foot in the door, you get to know the whiskey, you get to know what they're about, and then if you want more complexity, you go for those different kind of finishes. I think I would like to see this at a slightly higher ABV. I mean, there was a bit of citrus on the nose that didn't really come through into the palate. There was a bit of fruitiness that just didn't kind of deliver there. And then the finish didn't really have a huge amount of evolution. And I'd like to see if this was a few points of ABV higher, even cask strength, how that would change. Even if the whiskey didn't really change all that much going at that higher ABV, I think it would be nice to kind of get more of those sweetness, more of that charred oak, more of that kind of nice round kind of character to the whiskey. Still though, if you're looking for a nice, easy to drink whiskey, it's a bit more upmarket, it's a bit different, it's going to be one that kind of anyone can enjoy, the Fercullen 8-year-old blend is going to be a nice one to go for. So with that in mind, I think I'm going to keep on sipping this. I put out new whiskey reviews every Wednesday and I put out new cocktail recipes every Friday, so subscribe, you'll see them all, and until next time, sláinte.